Hey everybody, this is Kimberly. I'm working on the Criss Cross bag today. So I'm also going to be adding in this new zipper pocket lining. I already have the credit card slot and the credit card zipper pocket, but I had a lot of people asking me for just the zipper pocket. So I already did this one, and this is going to be one of our lining panels. And then here's the other lining panel. So if you're using the zipper pocket lining, when you look at your cutting instructions, you only want to cut one of the lining panels A. Then you have two exterior panels. I'm actually using two different materials. I'm using this for the front and this vinyl for the back. And then you need your two accent colors. I went ahead to make it easier for myself when I go to put these down. I went ahead and marked the back, since it's vinyl, with this, so I know that the piece goes like this instead of that. So if you get confused, make sure when you look at the cutting instructions, you're putting the part that's width along the width of your bag. Okay, so I'm going to set this stuff out of the way for right now. We don't need that. And I've gone ahead and stitched out the placement line. And I really apologize. I know it's hard to get this whole hoop in the video. I should have done the small one, but I wanted to do the big one. And then you see I have 3 placement lines for the zipper. The reason I do that is because all of my bags from 2020 on can use either a number 3 zipper. Let me cut a little piece of that to show you what that looks like. So this is a number 3 zipper. It's your traditional dressmaker zipper. And by and far, it should fit right in between those 2 lines on your zipper cutting. And a lot of people will only give you those lines and you have to fit it in there. That's great if you have a number 3 zipper. It's not always great because some number 3 zippers are actually a little bit wider than 1 inch and some are a little less wide. But I'm using a number 5 zipper for this one. So a number 5 zipper is wider. The teeth are wider. And so I need, if I try to put this down here, I can't center it because it's wide. So I put this center zipper line. So when you place your zipper down, you can look. It's easy to see on this one. It's dark. But you can see that the center of the line right behind your zipper teeth, and you line that up with that center zipper line, and your zipper will be placed nice and even. So I always tape it down at the other end first, and wow, I cut this way too wide. That's okay. And I'm not in love with the zipper tape, but I realize I don't have like any solids zippers, and so the materials I'm using today really could have benefited from having a solid zipper. Okay, so I tape it down at the end first. I'm using, have no-show poly mesh, not fusible, just no-show poly mesh hooped. And I'm using Transpore medical tape by 3M. And then I just kind of walk the zipper down and place the tape as I go on the bottom. And I try to keep it out of the stitch path. Not always great at that, but I try. And then I go down to the next section. I'm making sure that that's even all along the way. And this zipper is actually a little bit curvy. The tape is. So hopefully my zipper will be nice and straight once I get it stacked down. Probably could have tried to iron it maybe. I don't know. Okay, and then I'm going to go down and do the very last section. And I try to pull it tautly as I go. All right. And I made mine really, really big, long, so I don't need to worry about my presser foot hitting this because it's going to be off the hoop since I made it so long. But normally you'd want to go ahead and tape that down so your presser foot doesn't hit it. Okay, so there we go. All ready to go. And then we're going to run number 2, which is just going to tack the zipper down, and then we'll remove the tape from it. Oops. All right. Okay, I think we're good. I was worried that being wavy there, that was going to be a little bit off. Now, I am going to skip through some of this video because you don't want to have to sit here watching 5 minutes while it does satin stitching. But I'll try and make sure I get all the good parts in the video, though. All right, now we're going to go ahead and remove the tape. And you can usually get 2 to 3 uses of this tape. So I just kind of leave it on my machine here. So I have all this dark gook. It's time for a de-cleaning of this girl. The adhesive leaves that little residue behind. Okay, so now we're going to flip over to the back of our hoop. And we're going to take our lining panel that does not have the pocket. Or in your case, you're just going to be using the first lining panel of A. And we want to make sure we have this centered over the hoop. One thing I need to do before we go forward is, because I'm going to be using that lining, that panel, I need to measure my zipper and mark the center of it, because you're going to be using a pattern that's not intended to have a lining pocket. So it's not going to have a center mark for you, right? So you need to measure it. So I'm going to put my ruler here, and I'm going to go right to where the end of the zipper tape is tacked down. So in this case, it's not good, Kimberly. 9 3/4. So I got to go half of that. So 9 is 4.5. 9 1/2 is 4.75. So we're going to be 4 and 5, or 4 and, so 4.75 plus 1/8. So I go to 4.75, which is right here, and then that extra little short tick, and I mark it. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect, but you do want your pocket to look centered. So now I have my little center mark here that I just made. So when I go to add my lining with the pocket on it, I can center it. All right. So now that that's centered, it'll also make it easier for you to make sure your lining is centered. So you want your lining to go right side down. So what you do, if you want to center it, is just go ahead and fold it in half and line it up with that centering line. And then it should be the top edge of the lining will go with the bottom edge of the zipper. And then just open it up. And now you know you have a completely centered panel. I hope you do not hear the child crying in the background. My son is playing Minecraft with his buddy, and one of the babies are crying. Okay, and I put a little piece of tape in the middle too, because this is a really long panel. Carefully flip it over. If you want, you can tape it to this. I don't find that to be an issue. And then we're going to do the same thing with our exterior panel. I'm trying really hard. I made this really smart choice of doing a pattern. So I actually did a pre-pressing because I want to try and make sure this lines up with the zipper. Cross my fingers. So I'm going to line up the pre-pressing I made with the bottom of the zipper tape. But normally you'd have this cut off there and line it up with the bottom of the panel. So I'm going to guesstimate and see if that's going to work. So the zipper, I think I might get lucky. So I could have trimmed that, but I wanted to make sure I didn't, in case I needed it. I messed up. Okay. So I'm going to come over. Oops. I don't have this trimmed enough down here. This has got to come closer down here, because the bottom flails out a little bit. So make sure you have this centered in relation to your bag. And I just unthreaded my zipper, or my needle. Okay, so now I'm going to flip it over to this side, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm lining up my fold there with the bottom of the zipper, but you're going to be lining up the bottom of your panel with the bottom of the zipper. I'm just being special. Make sure this didn't come loose. And it did. Okay, then I'm going to put a piece in the center. And And then I'm going to trim this away once I know it's good. So that's just a little tip that you can do yourself if you're trying to use a paneled or patterned material and you want to line it up with the zipper. So when you do the number 5 zipper, there's going to be about a 3/8 inch space between the tack down and the bottom of the zipper. When you're using the number 3 zipper, it's going to be 1/4 inch. So you can measure that and make sure you're going to hit the target you want. And it looks like I'm going to hit it just underneath. And I will totally redo this if it's not right. Yeah, it's just underneath, but with the fold of the material, hopefully it'll lay down right where I want it to be. I think it's a little bit off, but I think I'm going to live with it. All right, so now we're going to flip over to the back, and we're going to go ahead and flip down this lining panel, and we're going to finger crease the seam. And you're going to do it gingerly because your hoop is now upside down, and you don't want to be pushing too hard, else it could come unhooped. So I just take my fingernail. If you don't have a fingernail, then use a boning tool or whatever you have, and I just run it along that little seam. It just helps make the pocket lay down, or the lining lay much better. And I cut my lining a little bit long, so I'm going to go ahead and get my scissors and trim out this a little bit because it's in the way of my attachment. And I could just fold it up, but I don't need to do that because this is too long anyway. All right, I'm going to go ahead and put a little piece of tape down here at the bottom to hold this in place. So now it's nice and neat. And then carefully, when you flip it over, make sure that you can still see it underneath, that it didn't come loose. And now I'm going to go ahead and trim off this extra seam allowance here on my, this is, oh, I didn't tell you where the materials were from. This is all from Dee Oh, Dee Oh, BODEEOH, 3 words. And this is upholstery weight material, and my understanding is she basically gets like scraps of rolls of leftover vinyl and materials from a furniture manufacturer and then sells that. So she's doing a great thing for the environment. All right, and then we're going to go ahead and fold this down, and again we're going to finger crease it. And I see my lining is coming loose down there. And if you're using vinyl or something heavier like this, you might need a boning tool. So I'm going to make sure I'm holding it against the bed of the machine so that gives it some extra support. And then I'm going to tape it to the side here so it holds it down. Sometimes the weight of it alone will work. And I think I did a pretty good job. So I'm going to top stitch this. And right here in the center, I can see the zipper's a little bit off, so I'm going to try and pull that a little bit. And you can like use your stiletto or whatever to help guide your material if it looks like it's getting off kilter. Just put your stiletto in there. I'm using my seam ripper end, but all right, awesome. Now we're ready to do our applique, but we do not, oh, see, I didn't fold it down enough right there. See how it's not even here? That's why. I'm just going to live with it because it's not going to impede the zipper, but I didn't pull this down enough, and that's why it's uneven. So we're going to go ahead, we don't want to stitch through our lining panel, so we're going to go ahead and flip this over on the back and fold it out of the way. Now I'm going through this upholstery weight material, so I'm not too worried about the satin stitching, but if you're using a normal cotton weight material here, I would recommend that you add some stabilizer on the back to help support the satin stitching. So we're going to go ahead and run the first placement line for the left panel accent. All right, so hopefully you can see that line right there. Now we're going to go ahead, and again, I mentioned this in the video for doing the zipper pocket. It's always best to not take your hoop off if you don't have to. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get my accent panels, and I know that the one that's the tallest is going to be on that side, but you're going to look at your cutting instructions and figure out which one to put here. And we're going to lay it down like this, just square like this. We're not going to try and go like this and estimate it. We're just leaving it square like this. And then what you're going to do is you just want to make sure that here's the top of it, that it's crossing over the top of it by about 1/4 inch, so you have something to hold on to when you trim it. And then you want it to be at least 1/2 inch on the outside. And if you do it right, then it should be crossing over here as well. So I try to give you generous cutting. And then we're going to go ahead and put a piece of tape there, just so it doesn't wiggle out of the way. And we're going to run the stitch to tack it down. Make sure your lining is still out of the way. Okay, so now what you want to do is trim away the extra material here. Since I'm using this upholstery weight fabric underneath, I'm not worried about trimming this extra away. But if you're doing vinyl, I would recommend trimming this away up to the seam allowance, because otherwise your corners will be really heavy. And actually I might do that just because the corners have a slight curvedness to them. So I think I am going to trim away some of this extra. I definitely have way too much on the bottom of this. So let me trim that out first. Yeah. This is actually where the, I meant to trim it earlier. There is some interfacing already on the back of this, so I didn't have to add interfacing, but that's where it ended. Okay, so all I'm going to do is get my scissors, and I'm just going to do a big, it doesn't have to be perfect, I'm just going to do a big chunk just to try and keep our corner with less material in it. And you have this big piece that you can use for something else. So now you see how we won't have that extra bulk in our corner when we go to turn it. So now when you're using the applique scissors to trim this off, I want you to have the rounded edge on the back side like this. The reason for that is if you have a vinyl that has the flannel backing on it, you really need to keep the scissors almost straight up and down. You don't want to cut that at a bevel because this vinyl doesn't have it, but I'm trying to show you how to keep it straight up and down. When you cut it at an angle, that flannel back vinyl, the flannel has little fuzzies that end up getting into past the bean stitch tack down. And it's really hard to trim them. And then when you go to do the satin stitching, it gets caught in it and it looks messy. So if you keep your bevel paddle on the back of the scissors so that it's against the stitching like this, you can get a nice cut. Hopefully you can see that that cut is really nice. So now if you were using cotton is a time where I would recommend that you go ahead and add some stabilizer behind here, but I'm not using cotton, so I'm not worried about that. So I'm not going to let you wait while I do this. I'm going to find the color that matches, and then I'll be back after I do the satin stitching. Okay, I'm back. So what we've done is I went ahead and finished step 7, which is the satin stitch. Then I just wanted to point out to you that so that we can carry the presser foot up to here instead of having to go all the way around, I have a couple of basting stitches right here and right here that bring us up to here. Some of the machines have trouble navigating that way, but I'm going to go ahead and remove these basting stitches here so that I can trim out the material after I add the lining, or the the accent panel here. You can trim it out now too, since you know where it's going to stitch. So just wanted to let you know that is on purpose. So that's part of this stitch. It's going to stitch here to here, and then it'll ring color stop 8 will be the placement line for the right panel. So let me remove this tape out of the way. We don't need this anymore. And I just get my little seam ripper and pull these stitches out. They're pretty big stitches, so they usually come out pretty easily. My seam ripper is getting dull. I don't know how to sharpen it. I'm gonna have to figure that out someday here. So I'm gonna go ahead and trim out this extra material like I did over there. Just rough trim it, just to help reduce the bulk in our seams. All right, and now we're gonna go ahead and, just like we did over there on the left side, we're gonna put our accent panel down on the right side. And you'll notice I changed the thread color. I got that idea from one of my testers. I loved it. She switched the colors around on the 2 vinyls, and I was like, oh, that's a great idea. So I totally stole this idea from her. And so again, you just want to make sure that you're covering at the crisscross right here. It's going to cover over there, and you want to make sure it's covering up here. And then we're going to go ahead and, I'm not going to tape that down. It's pretty strong weight, so I'm not too worried about it, and I can put my hand right here. So we're going to go ahead and run the tack down now. And I just want to show you one more time about trimming out the applique there. So again, we want the beveled part of our scissors, this wing. Grayson, I'm on a video, please. We want that to be facing back here on our stitches so that we can get a nice straight up and down trim. So start at the very end. Shbay, come here. Sorry about that, the dog is crazy. Just one moment. Okay, so we want to keep our scissors as straight up and down as we can. And do not worry if you slightly cut into the stitches, because the satin stitch is going to cover it up first of all. And it's a triple stitch, so it actually is usually pretty secure. If you do accidentally hit one of them, it's usually okay. And I'm just going to keeping the scissors up and down as much as I can and staying real close to that stitch line, because I don't want this material to show in my applique. And then just take your time. And if you have to come back in and clean it up with some smaller scissors, then, you know, go ahead and do that. But the idea is to have a full pass and get it all at one pass. And then I can save these little big pieces. I think I did an okay job there. Looks pretty good to me. So now I'm going to go ahead and run the satin stitch 10 on the right panel, and then I'll be back. Okay, so I've gone ahead and finished both my satin stitches, and we're ready to do the D-ring strap connector placements. But before we do that, we want to go ahead and flip over to the back of our hoop and put our lining back down. And this time, make sure you put a few pieces of tape at each corner so it doesn't come loose while we're working. One thing I forgot to mention, I learned this from one of my testers, but I haven't been doing it myself. She actually cuts out the extra stabilizer behind the zipper after the tack down so that she doesn't have to try and do it while it's caught in between the seams. I think that's a really great idea, and one of these days I'm going to remember and do it so I can take pictures for the PDF. So that's just something to keep in mind. So I'm going to go ahead and put this back on, and we're going to run step 11, color stop 11, which is going to give us our placements for our D-ring strap connectors. So there's, on the largest bags, there's one on either side, and then there's two at the top, so that you can choose how you want your strap connectors on your bag. Normally in the larger bags, I do at the top, and like the smaller, like the 8.5 by 6 on down, I do them just one with a wristlet strap on either the right or the left. I always put it on the left since I'm right-handed. Okay, and actually I haven't cut my little materials yet. Let me do that real quick. So I'm using 3/4 inch D-ring strap connectors. That's what I like the most for these size bags. For the small bag, like the 5 by 7, that 1.5 inch ones are really good too. And then I just cut it about 3 inches wide, or I'm sorry, long. And I think I'm gonna like be a little bit extra and do reverse the two colors on the D-ring strap connectors. Thought that would be a cool idea. So, and this is in the cutting instructions. I was planning on using the scraps to do it. That's why mine is not cut to begin with. I knew I'd have these little corners to use. And I just estimate. I don't normally cut it to 3 inches. I just eyeball it because I know how much space I can have between my presser foot and the D-ring. So you need to know how much you can have between yours as well. So let me get a D-ring here. Oh, these are not the same depth. Some are skinny and some are fat. Okay, so I'm going to put the green one on this side. So I'm going to use the top, and I apologize, I should change the color so you could see it. It's going to be hard to see because it's blue, but you'll see it on yours. So there's one here, 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 and here. And then I just, I usually make them about 1 inch wide, so you can use up to 1 inch wide hardware, but I just go ahead and center it so that it's on the centermost part of the line, the placement line, since it's a little bit wider. On my machine, with this particular presser foot, I know that I can line up my D-ring, the top of the D-ring, with the top of my panel here, and then I have enough room to get by, and it's short enough. So you have to figure out what that measurement, that secret measurement is on your machine. You might have a wider foot than I do, and so you might need to have a longer you know, you might have to have your D-ring strap connector down here instead of up here. But I'm going to balance mine because I actually did, remember I didn't get that pulled down properly. This is marine vinyl, so it's pretty sturdy. So I feel okay just using the one layer. But normally with most vinyls, I would say give it a backing, fuse some Decoville light to the back of it, just to give it a little bit more strength. Now, if you're doing a sewing machine bag, you know most sewing machines, especially industrials, can get through thicker layers. But most of our embroidery machines just can't get through traditional D-ring straps, which are usually they're 3 inches folded in half and folded the half to the center. Most of the single needle machines just can't get through that. It's just too, they're not strong enough. That's not their intention. We make these machines do stuff that they're not really intended to do. You'd think that the machines would catch up with us though. You know, give it a stronger engine or whatever it is, because it's become such a popular thing now to make bags and such in the embroidery machines. So I just switched to my 9014 needle. I find that the 9014 is a little bit too thick for satin stitching. I prefer, it tends to, especially if you're using a thinner vinyl, it can perforate the vinyl. So I did the 7511 for the satin stitching, but once you get to the D-rings, you're going to be going through a lot of layers of vinyl. If you're using cloth, you're probably okay, but if you're using vinyl, you really need a 9014 needle. And I don't need to waste those stitches since I can stitch forward on my machine. I'm actually just going to stitch forward until I get to the next one. And then I'll stop it when we get down there to that one. And I see, I think I'm okay. I'm going to go ahead and pull the D-ring down a little bit because remember I messed up my panel, so it's a little bit off. So I'm going to make it even with my top stitching. That way I know it's even. That's better. So let me take it off here. So because I got this up too high, I couldn't really use it as a good measure. So I'm just going to make it even with the top stitching. Because you do not want to risk hitting this with your, where's that at? Then yeah, gotta look at it myself in the light. You don't want to risk hitting the needle on your hardware. Because if you do, it's going to break it. And also it could actually make the timing of your machine get off. Okay, there we go. I think that's good now. And I'm just going to keep an eye on because my machine, oops, sorry, I got a little bit off kilter on the bottom. I do not like that. I want it to stay even. My machine likes to do all this crazy pulling all the way around to draw the tail. So as soon as I hear the cutter finish, with this machine, the 550E, you can actually pull this foot up higher. In this case, it just went straight across, but sometimes it'll come down here. And if it does that, it can hit your D-ring strap connector and then get all out of whack. So again, I'll show you that again. As soon as I hear the cutters engage, I lift up this all the way like that. And see right there, it would have hit that. We can go ahead and stop now because we don't have any reason to trim those, stitch those last stitches since we don't have a D-ring strap connector down there. Okay, but do make sure you remember to forward your machine to step 13. Okay, so now we're getting close. Remove this tape. Try to remove it as you go along in your project. The same with cutting the tails, because if you don't, it'll get stuck in your final project and you will not be a happy camper. So we need to turn around to the back of our hoop And now this is when we're going to use our lining that we prepared. So I'm actually going to stop and restart so that I can add this extra little bit to the other video. All right, so we're at the point now where we're going to add our second lining panel to our bag. So I've already gone ahead when I first started and marked the center mark for my lining. So I sometimes, if this little pole is dragging on the bottom of the machine, it kind of, well, it drags. It's basically what it does. So I'm just going to put a little piece of scrap stabilizer just to help make sure that that doesn't get stuck on the bottom of the machine and drag it too much. So we're just going to put that on here just so it's out of the way of our stitch area. Actually, I'm going to pull it down a little bit. And that way it won't drag on the bottom of our machine bed. You may not have this issue on your machine. When I had the credit card slot one, I didn't have this issue. But I'm thinking because there's no credit card slot bulk here, that's why it was giving me a hard time. And I think I need to trim this just a little bit. So that way that's out of our way. So we have our center line marked, and we have our top placement line, our original placement line from our zipper. That's important that we want to use that one so that we get the correct seam allowance. We don't want to use the top of the zipper because we're using a number 5 zipper. Remember, that's an 1/8 of an inch higher. We want to use this line here that is from the original placement line. If you're using a number 3 zipper, that's going to be where your zipper's at. So on our panel, we have our placement line here and our registration tick. We're going to fold this and make sure this tick meets our middle placement line, and this line of stitching is going to meet that original placement line. Not the top of the zipper, but the original placement line. So what I do, I hope you can see this. I know it's a little dark. I'm so sorry about that. Don't move the machine. So what I do is I find the little tick mark and I pull that up here to the placement line, to the tick mark, or the center line I measured earlier. And then I just kind of fold down on the registration line with the material and fold it down and pull this along so that it's on that line the whole way. And so now it's even there. And then I'll do the same thing over here, but usually if it's even on one side, it should be even on the other side. And I'm going to make sure it matches. And there it is. So it's kind of hard to see. I don't know if you can see that, but everything matches now. And I'm carefully going to tape it down on the sides and in the center really well, because I do not want this to come loose on me when I worked so hard to make sure it was all lined up. And you see there's some unevenness in the placement here, so don't worry about that. Just tape it down as well as you can. And then I usually don't have to tape it down on this end, but you can if you want. So now it's all taped. I'm going to carefully flip it over. And now we're going to get our back position. I'm going to pull these little zipper pulls down and D-rings, and I'm going to tape them in place, because this vinyl is allowing them to bounce up, and I do not want them to get stuck when I'm stitching. So just tape those down. Tape is your friend when you're doing any of the hoop projects. And see, I put it in the center and then rub it down so it stays. Now we're going to take our panel for our back, and we're going to center that over. And this one, you can actually just center it with the top of the zipper. It's fine. There's enough cutting in it. So just center that over your hoop and make sure it's even with the top of your zipper and tape that down. No, we have not opened our zipper yet. Leave your zipper alone. I mean your zipper pull. I'm going to put a piece in the middle because with the long bags, once it hits this, the going up and down the depth, sometimes we'll pull that in. And I don't want it to do that. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and run color stop 13, which is going to be our tack down. And you see how it struggled getting through that area there. I'm hoping my thread will not break on me. When I get down to the end of these old Floriani or Fuju, see it's coming loose here, so I want to keep an eye on it. It's Floriani or Fuju thread. They tend to not stitch very well. And see, that did get a little bit off kilter going through that thickness. It's not too much, but it's a little bit off because it's so thick here. Okay, so now we're going to flip over to the back and we're going to remove our tape. And then we're going to fold this up. And this is where that piece might come in handy when it's reaching the bottom of our bed. Carefully finger crease the seam and tape it back down. And then at this point, you're just going to finish the bag just as the instructions tell you for whatever bag you're working on. So I'm going to go ahead and tape this down. And there you go. So that's how that lining works. Okay, so now we've gone ahead and got our lining tacked down. Now we're going to go back to the front of the hoop. And you have a choice here to make. You can open this up and top stitch so that you have a top stitch on the back of the vinyl. And just to match the front. And that looks like this. But I generally don't do that when I'm using these strap connectors because we already saw how it kind of bounced here because it's so thick. Now if you do this again, you have another layer of thickness through there. So the top stitching sometimes gets a little bit out of whack because your machine can't get through all these layers. At this point, it would be trying to go through 1, 2, 3, 4 layers of vinyl, 2 layers of cotton, and the zipper. So when I use the D-ring strap connectors up here, I don't top stitch it. So in that case, I'm just leaving it flat and I'm just going to go ahead and run the top stitch because I do want the lining on the back to get caught in a top stitch. The reason for that is it just helps that lining lay better in the bag and not pull up into your zipper hole. So just make sure this stays straight. But you can go ahead and top stitch it if you want. And I can see right here, you can see where it kind of gets a little bit out of wonk. It might have been okay, but I don't like to take that chance. Okay, so now we can go ahead and remove this tape. We don't need to take our hoop off the machine. Again, we want to try and reduce how often we do that. The more often you pull it off the machine, the more likely you're going to be to unhoop it. But we're getting ready. We're going to go ahead and stitch down our exterior panel together now. So we do want to go ahead and open up our zipper. So what I do is I just take, I have a lot of tape in here I got to remove. I take and pull the zipper pull over so it butts up against the right D-ring strap connector. So I'll go ahead and take this off the hoop to show you. So I'm going to pull it all the way over to there. So I need to pull this D-ring up to do that. And if you worry about your pole being too dangly or if it's really thick, then you could tape it down. And now what I want to do is I want to make sure I pull this very tautly. The more tautly you pull this vinyl down, the better the top will look like a top zipper. I used to show in some of my earlier videos how to cut away the stabilizer here and pull the zipper down on top of itself. but I have found most single needles cannot get through all that thickness. That creates a really big thickness, and most single needle machines cannot get through that. Now this machine, or this vinyl, has a slight knitted backing on it, and there is some stretch in it. So you want to be cognizant of that, because what can happen is when the presser foot is pushing down, it can kind of bunch it up. So I normally use my I just lost the name of them. I normally use the little things that I use to turn. They're like biceps or triceps, whatever that's called, or forceps, I mean. I usually normally use that to guide this along to help keep it flat, but I have somehow misplaced those while I was in the hospital, and my friends were cleaning my stuff up for me. So I'm just going to use this here. I'm keeping my finger away from that needle, but I just kind of want to guide this and coax it and make sure it doesn't come loose. And so what we're going to do is we're going to stitch down to halfway here. Then it's going to come over here with a little bit of a running step so that we can come back up here and start. So I'm going to go ahead and coax this over here, make sure it's held in place. Oops. Oh, hold on. I have a little box here and it just bumped up against that. That is all it takes to throw your project out of whack. So I'm going to go ahead and cut off my thread, and I'm going to make note of where I'm at positioned wise. On step 15, 7277, I'm turning my machine off. I'm turning it back on. It's going to ask me if I want to resume, and I'm going to say no. No. So I hit the X. Then I'm going to load my project again, fresh. Now, you may not have to do that on your machine, but on my machine, if I bump something like that, it throws the configuration of the hoop off, and it could just be a half an inch and your bag is going to be shot. So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward to the step we were on, and I'm going to resume there. And it was like at 72.77 or something like that. Take the time to do it, because once you're off kilter, you can't get back on kilter. Okay. So I went all the way back to where it stopped so that you can see. We're going to have a carry stitch, because if I stopped it here, it's going to go and try and travel up to here, and you're going to hit your hardware. So I add this little carry step here, or travel step, whatever you want to call it. Well, it didn't get it there. It would normally do a few stitches there. And then it's going to come up here and start again. And I think even after that, I got off kilter still. Let's see if it lines up. Yeah, it's okay. All right, so now we've got all that stitching done for to hold the exterior together. Now we're ready to flip it over to the back, and the first thing that we want to do is take the stabilizer away from the zipper. So I do that by carefully putting my zipper or my seam ripper underneath the stabilizer, and you can see through it, so you can see where the blade is at. And I'm having trouble because my other seam ripper is better. And then I just coax it along here, and it pulls the stabilizer right out of that seam. Then to do the other side, I flip over the hoop and I put it down so I'm not I'm gonna unhoop it and I carefully start on this side, and then I have to hold it with my fingers, or you could use tweezers, so that I can keep the tension good along the entire path. And when I do that, it helps you not cut the material, first of all, but secondly, it helps pull that stabilizer right out of that seam. Or you could do like Amanda does and trim this out right after you tack down your zipper. And then you don't have to worry about risking cutting it. And usually by the time I get to the very end, I don't have good luck with using the seam ripper, so to do these cross pieces, so I just use the regular scissors to do that. Okay, now we can go ahead and remove our little padding here that we had to make sure our zipper pole didn't get hung up on the bottom of our machine. Remove all this extra tape. And you're going to notice that your machine says you have 2 more spots, 16 and 17, but that's lying to you. We're not going to run step 17. That is just a stopping place to make sure that your zipper, or I'm sorry, that your machine doesn't cross over and get stuck on the hardware. So we're going to go ahead and pull this down, and just like we did on the front, we want to pull it as tautly as we can, but we don't want to risk unhooping our project, so don't pull it too hard. But just pull it on the bottom here, and then I gotta look at it myself here. So pull it towards you as tautly as you can, and then tape it down. And you can see, I can already see that I got a little bit of give in my bag here, so I'm gonna hurry up and get this done before it comes undone, comes unhooped. So I'm just doing one in the middle and one at each corner. That's usually all you need. Okay, and then carefully going to turn it over so nothing comes loose, and then put it back on the hoop attachment. And then just like we did for the exterior panel, we're going to start at the top for each of these seams. And the reason we start at the top is, again, there's some stretch in some of the vinyls or even cotton. I'll finish when I'm done here so you can hear me better. So it's going to go to the other side and make some travel stitches so that it doesn't go like this. All right, we're done. So I'm gonna go ahead and push my hoop down here to the bottom. I can do that on my machine, just so it's out of our way. Okay, so what I was saying is, when there's a little bit of give or stretch in the material, if we were to stitch like this, then it's potential that it could push up and get bulky right here in your corner, and we don't want that. So by pushing it down here, we can coax any kind of gathering that might happen into the bottom of the bag where we have more control. Now, before you unhoop, you always want to turn to the back and make sure your lining did not shift. It's harder to see the stitches, but you'll see right here, and there's an opening here to turn the bag, and here. So we're all set. We can go ahead and unhoop it. Remove all the tape that you can find as you go along. Move your hoop out of the way. And this, you would not believe how heavy this actually is now, because it's got a lot of material on it. And you don't want to leave this tape in your bag, because over time some of these tapes get gummy and wet, and that could seep through to your bag. So try to make sure you get all the tape out of the way. Now, one thing I like to do is trim the vinyl a little bit more narrow than the cloth. You can go to an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance with the vinyl. So if you hold the stabilizer like this, it'll help you hold the cotton lining out of the way, so you don't accidentally cut that at an 1/8 of an inch, because that's too short. Oops, that's too narrow for cotton. If you do an 1/8 of an inch at cotton, it's going to be more likely to tear, and there's not enough give in it for when you turn the bag and everything, and it'll come right out of the seams. Normally I would leave a little bit longer on the zipper tail too, but this is a really nice thick hefty zipper, so I'm not worried about that. I would also usually use a lighter and melt the edges of the zipper, but my lighter is actually dead, so I had to order some from Amazon, because I'm not about to be going into any stores right now to buy a lighter. I don't know about you guys, but I don't go in anywhere right now until I'm vaccinated. So I'm just trimming out this stabilizer to get it as close to the seam as I can. And you can save these scraps. They work really good for actually supporting the satin stitching, just like we did in this bag. And that's usually what I do. I just have a little drawer down here, and they're all shoved in there. And sometimes I can't get it close enough, but just do the best I can. I am using Kai 7200 series scissors. They are a little pricey, but they are worth it. Oh, I didn't do the bottom. So let me do the bottom. So again, we can go about an 1/8 of an inch with the cotton or the vinyl. And that just helps make your seam allowance. Oh, that was a really bad trimming right there. It reduces the bulk in your seam allowance, so when you turn the bag, you get a nicer effect. Okay. All right, now let me finish getting the stabilizer out of here. And then I'm going to go around and I'm going to trim the cotton lining from the inside to 1/4 of an inch all the way around, except for the bottom opening. So here where the opening is, it's kind of hard to see from here, right here and here, we want a little bit. This is a trick I learned from sewing. Just about a 1/2 an inch seam allowance there, and it leaves that little tab a little bit longer, so that you have it's easier to fold it in when you close the bag. So you just leave a little tab there that's a little bit longer seam allowance. And then you can go around the bag. And I actually like to do it from this side if I can, because it's easier to see. And you just trim out 1/4 inch. And I did not do a very good job on that one. Now in the corners, I'm going to curve it, because there is a slight curve here. And then I'm going to show you, we're going to actually notch it as well. So, again, you get in here. And I know, I'm sorry I keep going off camera. It's so hard to do this on the big ones. Oops, and I'm getting close to having the battery be dead too. I'm still recording, aren't I? Yes, good. It's so hard to do on the big hoops. So I'm just curving around here and doing about a 1/4 inch from that seam. And then I'm going to trim down the top too. One important thing when you're trimming the top, do not cut your zipper tape. Because if you do, you take away all the stability of it, and that could actually make your entire bag shred. So I actually didn't trim this down, the vinyl down in the front top. I normally leave the tabs longer too. I'm really not practicing what I preach today. I have them pretty good in there. I'm actually going to trim out this vinyl a little bit more. So my tabs are actually a little bit longer. The reason why I leave the tabs a little bit longer is it's sort of like a cantilever effect. When you're putting a lot of weight in the purse, when there's that extra tab hanging down, it's less likely to pull the stitches out. But if you don't leave extra tab, then the bottom of the stitches is where you're cutting it. There's no extra give there. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and trim off right here. I didn't trim it too good there. Try not making sure I don't get my lining in there. And then these corners here, you can go ahead and trim this off a little bit. That'll help reduce the bulk. Again, don't get your zipper when you're turning out your corners. Hemostats, that's the word I was looking for. See, there's my zipper. I don't want to trim my zipper. I'm just going to reduce the bulk of that little vinyl and the cotton. I misplaced my hemostats, or somebody has misplaced them. And so it's really hard to turn the bag without it. And just go ahead, like I didn't do a very good job here, so I'm going to come back in and just trim a little bit more of it away, making sure I don't cut my lining. Right there, I'm just holding my lining back and trimming it away. And this will help reduce the bulk in our bag. Okay, now the corners, there's a slight curve there. Just so we can have a nice curve when we turn it, we just want to come in here and notch it. I usually do about 3 notches is enough. And the reason we're notching it is because this says, oh, don't ask me, convex curve. And if you just click, you just slice into it, there's no room for the vinyl to overlap. So if you cut these notches out, the vinyl can lay down inside there when you turn it out nicer. If you have the opposite curve, then you want to do the little slits. But for this type of outside curve, you want to do notches. And again, I'm only doing 3. It's just a slight curve there. The rest of the curve, there is a little bit of a curving angle up to the bag, but it doesn't need any notches. Now I'm going to reach in and I'm going to go ahead and start at the top here and pull the bag to the lining side out. And these bigger bags are nice and easy to do because they have a nice big opening. And then I'm going to grab my glue. I'm doing that, and some of these little clips. And I like the Fabri-Tac glue. I also have the 3-in-1 from Beacon, but the Fabri-Tac seems to adhere faster. And I often will wait until I turn the bag all the way right side out in case I make a mistake. But when I'm doing these demos, I like to go ahead and just glue it so you guys can see how I do it. So I got it out to the lining side. So I usually try and push out the corners while I'm at the lining side as well, because it helps then to close it. It makes the lining easier to close. So now you see how we have this nice curve here, and it automatically wants to go ahead and fold under. Now you're seeing that basting stitch from our interior pocket. If that bothers you, go ahead and pull that stitching out. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and fold at the line, and then I'm going to put the glue right along that stitch line and put the clips on there. And by the time I get to the end, the front side, the right side in this case, will already be secure that I can turn the bag to the right side out. Okay, so again, I have it there, and I'm just going to start. I do a couple inches at a time because this does get on your hands and it is hard to get off. And you have to shake it when it's like a little bit lower. So I just put the glue there, and then I pull the lining up onto the glue, trying not to get my hands in the glue. And make sure it's nice and even. And then I put the clip on it. And these are the cheap Wonder Clips that you can get like 100 for $10 on Amazon. I've actually not had any issues with them at all. And then I'm going to go ahead and do this side. Make sure you always put that red clip on this glue, because if you don't, the glue works itself out, especially if you knock it over. Ask me how I know. I have a damage on my table because I didn't realize the lid was off of it and it got knocked over, and so now it seeped out onto my table and it has damaged it. So always put that red cap back on. All right, now I'm going to keep working down here. I need one more clip, I think, but it's okay. It's so hard to get it out. You can't store it upside down because it'll seep out. I might try it and see if it'll work if I leave the red cap on it. If I can still do it outside. And sometimes when you get down here at the end, you do have to kind of get your finger in there. And so you do get a little bit on you. Usually I have those hemostats and I use the hemostat to do that. I'm going to hurry up because the battery is running dead. It is like, oh, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go. All right. Last one. So again, got the glue right there on that stitch line, and then just pull the seam right up there. It automatically wants to fold. All right, put the lid back on, and while it sits for a minute, you can go ahead and reach into your bag and push this side out. And then, oh, that's the inside pocket. You want to make sure you're at the right pocket. And look, I missed some trimmies. Like I said, trim those out as you go. And then we want to go ahead and reach inside and push the zipper the rest of the way open. And I have the D-ring in there taped down, so I need to lift it up and get it out of the way. And you just want to open that up all the rest of the way so that you can turn the bag to the right side. And I need to figure out where that thread is at so I can trim it off. Else it's going to get caught in my zipper. So trim that out. I have another one right here. Okay, now by this time, this side should definitely be ready to go. And you see how it already is sticking. And it'll fully cure after 24 hours. But it'll cure enough for you to be able to turn the bag to the right side. And it won't come loose. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and reach in and turn out the bag to the right side. Just start at any corner. And push it all out. And again, having a bamboo stick or some other pointing device is really helpful now to push out the corners. Also, a point turner tool, something like that is really helpful. And I'm like, of course, as soon as I get new hemostats in the mail, I'll find them. But, okay, so pull these D-ring tape off here so those can come out. And, you know what, I have this little stick thing here. Oh, it goes to my shelf. I wonder if this will work. I might try this. It's just one of these little, I have one of these little shelves from Michael's. Maybe this will work to help get my corners out. Okay, so go ahead and reach around and push out as much as you can with your fingers. And I'm having trouble here because the zipper, the little pocket is in here. And I'm seeing the zipper from that, and it's messing me up. It's like, no, 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 no. Okay. So, okay. I'm going to close that. Hopefully that'll help take away my confusion. Okay. Now, this is always the part. So I'm going to go ahead and try this thing and see if it'll help me push out those corners without tearing my vinyl. And if you rub the whatever device you're using along the inside seam, it'll help kind of smooth that seam out as well. The vinyl will smooth into the seam allowance. Yeah, this is actually working pretty good. Cool. It's not tearing. And then here along the side, you can kind of see, maybe I'm doing that. You rub it along there. This might actually work better than the hemostats. Okay, so push out as much as you can with your fingers, and then get whatever device you're using inside, and you'll just keep your hand on it like this, and keep your eye on so you'll see when the stitches are there, and then you know you're not tearing it through. And then rub along the bottom and open that, press that seam a little bit. Okay, now this is the part that always gets people, is the zippers. Because we're sewing the zipper into the side seams, it's kind of hard to get it out. So what I do on this side here, I put my device in like underneath that zipper, and I pull my thumb on top, and I just kind of pop it out. And sometimes you have to do it a couple times, but you just kind of pop it and it'll come right up for you. See? And then on this side, we have a little bit of bulk here. Now, some people will tell you to cut that away. I don't think that's a good idea, because you're going to take away the security of your zipper. So what I do is I push this down and kind of use my finger to pull the zipper out of that. And it takes a few times to do it, to get the hang of it. But if you do that, and then you pull the zipper tape out of that seam a little, then your bag will close more properly on this side. And I actually even have these, can I get them out easily? I bought these things, and you can actually use that to smash down the material and scrunch it. And then use your little whatever device you're using to try and push that zipper out of that seam. And just go slowly so you don't tear your zipper, but you shouldn't, because it's pretty secure in there. And then when you go to zip it closed, just the first few times, you have to kind of help it with your finger, and see, it closes. So that's the trick to it. And I can see I didn't get this out all the way, so I'm going to go in there and reach a little bit more and try and pop it out a little bit more. Now mine is starting to stick a little bit, because remember, I got it too high over here. So I'm going to go ahead and try and pop that up a little bit more. I'm just reaching in there and working that seam allowance, the extra material, into the seam allowance and popping it out. And then it has a much nicer look. Oh, there we go. And after you do that a few times, it'll be easier. And there we go. So here's Criss Cross, all done. I do want to point out one thing with Criss Cross. Depending on what materials you use, the bottom here may not show as much. I did go through after my first trial and made it a little bit more exaggerated so that it will work. But if you're using cotton, it has a much different look than vinyl, because the vinyl is thicker and it pulls it into it. But there we go. Oh, it's such a cute bag. I hope you guys enjoy this and enjoy doing the zipper liner. And let me show you that again real quick. I think I might have just janked up there. And there we go. So now you have a full width pocket inside. It goes almost to the bottom. And see, when we do that top stitching, it helps it lay in there better. Okay, guys, have a good night. Thanks.